If you're hearing this, it means I finally broke the oath my team swore we'd take to our graves. We didn't sign anything. There were no ceremonies, no official threats. It was just a shared look, a silent agreement between people who had seen something they shouldn't have. Something the world is not prepared to understand. They called him the Vanished King, a ruler who supposedly disappeared without a trace, a historical footnote wrapped in myth and speculation. Scholars argue about whether he fled, was assassinated, or simply died in the desert. But those theories exist only because the truth was torn out of history. The king wasn't lost. He was erased, carefully, violently, and absolutely on purpose. I was part of the excavation team assigned to investigate the royal necropolis that once belonged to his dynasty. It lies deep in the desert, so deep that you can walk for an entire day without hearing a single sound except the wind. And eventually, even the wind gives up. The place feels wrong in a way you can't quite articulate, as if the desert itself is trying to cover something it doesn't want humans to find again. At first, the assignment felt ordinary. The monotony of archaeology, sand in your shoes, heat that stings your eyes, broken pottery that you get excited about only because everything else is too ancient or too ruined to identify. Our team was small, just 6 of us. We laughed. We argued about coffee rations. We recorded shard after shard. There was a strange comfort in the routine. But routines exist, so you notice when something breaks them. It happened on the 3rd week. Ahmad called us over to a section of the sandstone wall he had been brushing. He'd uncovered a thin seam so perfectly straight it could not have been natural. A line in the rock that didn't match any blueprint, any layout, any ancient architecture we had studied. A doorway, a sealed one, sealed with a level of precision that suggested someone didn't want it opened again. We worked on it for hours, brushing, chiseling, digging away centuries of sediment. When the seam finally shifted, a draft of cold air spilled out, impossible cold for the desert. It smelled of age, not the age of dust or sand. Something older, like a forgotten library mixed with iron and something faintly sweet. Something wrong. Inside, the air didn't just feel old. It felt aware. The chamber walls were covered in carvings unlike anything documented from that era. The king, the one erased from records, was depicted in scenes that made my skin tighten. He wasn't shown triumphant or divine. He was shown kneeling, bound, dragged into darkness by faceless figures whose bodies were carved as silhouettes. No eyes, no mouths, just void-like forms. Someone had gouged out the king's eyes in every depiction. Someone had hammered out his name with a violence that survived thousands of years. You could still see the rage in the stone. The floor was worse. There were prints, shallow impressions in the dust that lined the chamber. At first glance, they might have been from sandals, but no. The spacing was wrong. The shape was wrong. The stride was wrong. They were not human. They were not animal. And they ended abruptly, mid-step, as if whatever made them had simply walked out of existence. In the center of the chamber stood a low, scorched throne, blackened by heat that somehow hadn't touched the rest of the room. The stone underneath it looked melted, fused with a golden crown that had liquefied and hardened again in a way no natural fire could have done. Around the throne were offerings, bowls filled with darkened residues, charms, relics, objects stained in patches of dried blood. The kind of blood that turns almost black after centuries. It didn't feel ceremonial. It felt like a crime scene frozen in time. Layla was the first to break the silence. Her voice was barely a whisper. This chamber was sealed for a reason. We should have listened. But curiosity is a quiet type of arrogance, the kind you don't recognize until it's too late. And all of us, in our own way, felt the pull of something deeper. Something important. Something forbidden, so we pressed farther into the chamber at the back wall. There was another seal, thicker, less elegant, as though it had been reinforced in panic rather than design. When we cleared the last layer of sand from its base, the wall shifted. It didn't crack like stone. It exhaled, a cold, metallic wind spilled out, brushing across our faces like something testing our temperature. The smell was wrong. Iron, leather, and something like wet stone dragged across a cave floor. Then came the sound, low, wet, organic, the kind of sound you hear when something alive moves through a place. It doesn't belong, and then it stepped out. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a mummy. It wasn't even a shape that fit into any category my mind could make sense of. It wore the remnants of a king's cloak, not draped, but clinging to it as though fused to its form. Its body was a silhouette, but one that didn't match its own shadows. Its face, if those shifting hollows could be called a face, was a collapsing maze of folds and cavities that moved like smoke trapped in skin. When it turned toward the throne, it moved with intention, recognition, hunger. Its elongated hand reached toward the fused golden crown, and the stone reacted. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. That's when panic replaced curiosity. We ran. We didn't speak. We didn't plan. We moved purely on instinct. The hallway felt narrower than before, as if the tomb itself resented our escape. The walls seemed to lean inward. The air thickened. Our lanterns flickered out one by one, swallowed by a darkness that felt alive. Behind us, footsteps. Slow at first, then impossibly close. Someone screamed, and then the scream cut off sharply. One of us didn't make it. His disappearance was as silent and complete as the king's. The official report says he left camp. It's a sentence polished enough for academia, a statement clean enough to hide a horror that no scientist would accept. I shouldn't have taken the relic. The crown fused to stone. But I needed proof. Proof that what we saw wasn't heat exhaustion or hallucination. Proof that something ancient and intelligent had been buried away from the world. Now, the relic hums faintly at night. A vibration, soft, rhythmic, like something tapping from the inside of the stone. Testing the barrier. Mapping it, learning it, and every night, without fail, there's a knocking on my walls. Slow, patient, not like a threat, like a check-in, like something making sure the path is still open, or almost open. If I disappear after this, remember, the king didn't leave his kingdom. He was taken, and whatever took him has learned how to follow.